Paying a visit to the North Country, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand announced a proposal for legislation that could put $50 billion toward rural development. Here's 7 News reporter Chad Charette.
It started with a tour,
and then we'll move into our Nautilus area.
Then the announcement.
Too often, federal economic policies have sidelined smaller communities and failed to support their unique needs.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's proposed Rebuild Rural America Act would invest $50 billion towards long-term rural economic development across the country. The money would be doled out as grants.
We can make a narrow and inflexible system better by allowing it to respond to communities' specific needs.
Public recreation is one of those needs, hence Gillibrand holding the presser at Lowville's soon-to-be Double Play Community Center. The bill would help fund similar projects across the country, but that's not all.
It would give them the support they need to improve everything from infrastructure and school to public health facilities and affordable housing options.
Double Play Community Center is currently in phase 1 of a 3-phase plan to improve recreational life in Lewis County. Executive Director Dan Myers says Gillibrand's proposal could make phase 2 a lot easier.
We really need to add a small gymnasium and turf area, and obviously some outdoor recreational with some walking spaces and some exercise stations and a bike trail possibly in the future.
Senator Gillibrand is aiming for the legislation to pass as part of this year's Farm Bill. She says it'll likely see bipartisan support.
Rural development is necessary in all states, red, blue, purple. And so with the makeup of the people on the Ag Committee, I feel like this will be a very wide bipartisan effort.
The Farm Bill is expected to pass by the end of the year, but it could take longer depending on whether or not legislators are in agreement. Chad Charette, 7 News.